No one warned you that seeing more comes at a cost. There is no such moment, no person who arrives and says, from a certain point on, you will stop fitting into the places you used to fit. It simply happens, slowly, and then all at once. You remain present and participating in the same situations, but there is something that starts not to add up. A feeling that you are slightly to the side of the scene, not outside of it, just displaced by a few degrees. Enough to notice what most people don't. Enough for perception to have a cost. The easiest conclusion, and the wrong one, is that something in you has failed. That the discomfort you feel in situations that seem simple to others is evidence of something broken. But discomfort is not dysfunction. Sometimes it is just the sign that you are operating at a level that the environment around you cannot yet support. That is what this video is about. There is a distinction that almost no one makes, and its absence causes enormous damage. The distinction between being present and being connected, between interaction and encounter, between occupying the same space as someone and actually meeting them there. Presence is physical. You can participate in the same gatherings, the same conversations, the same friendships for years, and be present in every visible sense. Connection is something else. It requires that two people occupy not only the same space, but the same register of experience. That what one person brings into a moment is received by the other with something close to precision. Not perfectly, but with enough precision that neither leaves with the feeling of having made a translation that lost the original. This kind of connection is far rarer than the word suggests when people use it casually. What you have been feeling is not loneliness in the common sense. Common loneliness has a clear cause, the absence of people. What you feel has a completely different structure. People are present, and still something does not arrive. Because interaction was never what you were truly seeking. You were seeking a specific quality of contact that most interactions cannot provide. And it is between what you brought into the environment and what the environment was able to return that this particular anguish resides. Most people will scroll past this video. Those who don't already know why, subscribe. This channel was created for them. The social world is not dishonest. It is worth pausing to reflect on this for a moment, especially if you have spent years with the vague suspicion that the interactions around you are somehow constructed or superficial. They are not. What they are is regulated, and regulation is not the same as deception. Human beings in proximity to one another develop systems of exchange that prioritize continuity over depth, legibility over precision, and the reduction of friction over genuine exposure. This happens because dealing with the full inner weight of every person you encounter would make ordinary life practically impossible. The social world operates on a kind of agreed-upon compression, and most people participate in it so naturally that the compression itself becomes invisible. They do not perceive it as a choice because, for them, it never needed to be. For you, it has always been a choice. You feel everything happening in real time. You know which observation you decided not to express, which question you replaced with something safer, which version of your real answer you swapped for one that would move through the conversation without shifting its tone. You're aware of the transaction in a way that makes it exhausting. Every ordinary social interaction carries a cognitive cost that others do not pay, and the accumulation of that cost over an entire day of normal human interaction produces a fatigue that is genuinely difficult to explain to someone who has never felt it. Because from the outside, you did nothing more strenuous than talk to people. From the inside, you are navigating an ongoing negotiation between what you actually think and what the moment can absorb. That negotiation does not stop. It runs in the background in every environment you enter, in every conversation you take part in every relationship you try to maintain, and the price of it, paid in small invisible increments, is real. There is a specific moment when discomfort stops being vague and becomes structural, when you realize that what you are facing is not a state of mind, a phase, something that will resolve itself once you find the right people or the right context. What you are facing is a genuine incompatibility between two things you truly need. And that incompatibility is not accidental. It is fundamental. It sustains the entire architecture of your social life, and altering it changes everything. You need to be known, not included, not liked, known. And you need that knowing to reach the parts of you that do not fit well into ordinary conversation. At the same time, the process of being known at that level requires an exposure that most social environments actively punish. Through indifference, you bring the full weight of something real into a place, and the place remains at the same temperature. Nothing shifts, no one moves toward you, and you learn through repetition that the choice is not between being known and being alone. The choice is between being partially known and remaining in contact with people, or being fully yourself and losing your place entirely. This is the real conflict, a daily, concrete, recurring choice about how much of yourself remains intact in each interaction. And what makes it truly difficult is that both options demand something from you. Editing has a cost, but exposure does too. And there is no version of this in which you come out untouched. Most people have a relationship with the future that functions as a kind of automatic optimism, not necessarily conscious, but structurally present. The assumption that the next conversation will be easier, that discomfort is temporary, and that a sense of belonging will come. This assumption performs significant work. It keeps people moving toward other people. It makes the ordinary frictions of social life bearable because they are framed, without anyone deciding to frame them, as provisional, as something on the way to something. At a certain point, that assumption stops working, not because you become pessimistic. Pessimism is still a position organized around expectation, just a negative one. What happens is more subtle than pessimism. Anticipation simply loses its structure. You stop organizing the present around a version of the future where everything fits, where the right people appear in sufficient number, where the inner life you carry ceases to exceed what the people around you expected. And when that anticipation disappears, what remains is the present as it actually is, without the protection of what it could become. This is a significant shift in perception. It changes the texture of ordinary days in ways that are difficult to articulate, but impossible to ignore once they occur. What replaces expectation is not despair. It is something more like lucid continuity, the decision to move forward in a life you no longer interpret as a temporary condition. The rupture, when it finally settles, does not announce itself as a loss. It arrives almost identically to maturity, and in a way, it is. But it is also the end of a specific kind of hope that, despite its imprecisions, was genuinely sustaining. And the person who emerges on the other side is not simply wiser. They carry something that their previous version did not need to carry. And that weight is real, it is permanent, and pretending otherwise does not help anyone. Think about what it means to speak a language that no one around you shares, not as a metaphor, but as a practical reality. Everything you think, you continue to think. Everything you feel, you continue to feel. But the moment it has to travel from within you to another person, it goes through a translation that removes precisely the parts that gave it meaning. What arrives on the other side is precise enough to avoid confusion. It is not precise enough to be true. And you have been living inside this gap, between what you actually contain and what manages to get across, for longer than you can clearly remember. The people in your life are not indifferent. That is what makes the situation specific and difficult. Indifference would be easier to identify and to overcome. What you have is genuine care directed at a frequency you do not fully occupy. They respond to you with affection, consistency, and in real ways, but they respond to the signal that reaches them, not to everything you transmit. And the distance between those two things is not something you can reduce by being more open, more patient, or more willing. It is a limitation. The receiver was not designed for the full signal, and no effort from either side alters that architecture. There is a version of this that no one talks about because from the outside, it does not look like anything. You are functional. You show up when expected and complete the tasks that need to be completed. And somewhere beneath all that superficial competence, you are aware with the same quiet certainty you have learned to trust about most things, that you are mechanically living a life whose meaning you have temporarily misplaced. Not lost, misplaced. The distinction matters. To lose implies it is gone. To misplace means it existed, that it was yours, and that its current location is simply unknown. But the unknown becomes unbearable when what you cannot find is the reason you are doing all of this. The hunger that defines this phase is specific and uncomfortable, precisely because it cannot be satisfied by anything that is currently available. It is not a hunger for more stimulation, more achievements, more connections in quantitative terms. It is a hunger for a particular quality of experience that you have felt before, briefly and unpredictably, and that has become increasingly scarce in ways you cannot reverse by wanting it more or searching for it more intensely. The moments when your life felt inhabited, not merely occupied, when you were not observing your own experience from a distance, but immersed in it, with no perceptible gap between what was happening and what it felt like to be the person experiencing it. These moments exist in your memory with a texture completely different from everything around them, and their increasing rarity is not a mystery you can solve. It is a condition you are immersed in. The pressure to find solutions, to identify the lesson, recognize the growth, turn the discomfort into a narrative with a discernible arc, is one of the most persistent and least useful forces acting on you during this phase. It comes from both within and without. The mind, confronted with an experience that resists meaning-making, resorts to manufacturing meaning as a form of relief, and the meanings it produces in that state are almost always premature, coherent enough to be temporarily convincing, but insufficient enough to collapse within weeks under the weight of the real experience they were supposed to explain. The most accurate thing you can say about where you are is that you do not yet know what it is. And this not knowing, held without being falsified into something more comfortable, is the only honest position available to you right now. There is a trap that consciousness builds for itself, and it is so sophisticated that most people who fall into it never identify it as such. It presents itself as discernment, as the natural and justified result of having paid attention for long enough, as simply knowing, through accumulated evidence, what to expect from people and situations. Internally, it feels indistinguishable from acquired wisdom, and that is precisely what makes it dangerous, because beneath its reasonable appearance, it is actually a closed system, a system that continuously confirms itself and admits no information that might complicate its conclusions. It works like this. You have been in enough situations where the depth you were seeking was not available that your nervous system has begun to treat that unavailability as the default assumption. This means you enter new situations already oriented toward the evidence that will confirm what you expect to find. And, over time, this asymmetry in processing produces a portrait of the world that is distorted in a specific direction. In practice, this produces a person who becomes genuinely difficult to reach, because the defenses built from past experiences now operate independently of the present situation. Someone extends something real toward you, and it meets a perimeter built for a different threat in a different context. Long ago, the perimeter does not distinguish. It processes the new experience through the architecture of the old ones. And the person on the other side who brought something genuine and saw it met with distance does not always know that the distance was not about them. They simply feel it, and they adjust accordingly. And you lose something real without ever having made the decision to lose it. The most difficult part of defining this is that the protection was never irrational. Each of its layers was built in response to something real. The closure happened for reasons. This means that dismantling it requires something more precise than simply deciding to be more open, a word that has never helped anyone do anything. What it requires is the ability to distinguish between the situations that built the defense and the situations you are currently facing. You have to hold the history in mind without letting it dictate the present. This is no small thing. It is, in fact, one of the most cognitively and emotionally demanding tasks a person can undertake. But the alternative is a life lived increasingly within a protection that was built to preserve access to real experience, and that gradually becomes the main obstacle to it. One of the most quietly destructive expectations you can bring into human relationships is the assumption that people are hiding something deep. That if the right conditions were met, if the conversation lasted long enough, if the other person felt safe enough, something more substantial would eventually surface. It is a generous assumption, and in most cases it is wrong, because what you expect is not present in condensed form beneath the surface. It is simply absent, like a limitation of range. Some instruments do not produce certain frequencies. Expecting more does not change the instrument. The necessary adjustment is neither cynicism nor a lowering of standards in the usual sense of those expressions. It is more about a precise reading of instruments, understanding what a given person, in a given context, is actually capable of producing and interacting with that honestly, rather than clinging to the illusion of what you wish were there. Most people, when met at the level they are actually at, rather than the level you expected to find them, have something genuine to offer. It is simply not exactly what you were looking for. And the inability to receive what is actually present, because it is not what you most needed, is a loss in itself, quieter than the initial disappointment, but with more cumulative effects. What changes when you abandon the expectation of universal depth is not your standards but your attention. Instead of experiencing interactions with the constant frustration of someone whose request has not yet arrived, you begin to notice what is actually at stake. And what is at stake, in most ordinary human interactions, is something genuinely underestimated: the specific texture of another person's particular way of living, their specific concerns, their peculiar humor, their particular way of dealing with the problems that everyday life presents. None of this requires depth in the philosophical sense. All of it is real. And a life built in part on the honest appreciation of this everyday reality, without requiring it to be something it is not, is considerably less lonely than a life spent waiting for a quality of encounter that rarely happens and cannot be scheduled. The word survival carries a connotation that does not match what it actually describes in this context. When most people hear it, they think of endurance, of persisting through something hostile until conditions improve. That is not what survival means here. What it means here is closer to what a deep-sea diver understands about pressure, that the environment will not adjust to accommodate the body, so the body must develop a precise and practiced relationship with the environment as it actually is. Not a pretense that it is something other than what it is, a functional and lucid adaptation that allows a person to move through conditions that were not made for them, without being destroyed by the discrepancy. Surviving as this kind of person in this kind of world requires a very specific internal architecture, one that most people never need to build, because the world as it exists is already more or less calibrated to their frequency. You are building something that the default settings do not provide. A way of carrying the full weight of your inner life through long stretches of daily existence, where no one around you is aware of it and no one needs to be. A way of remaining open to the rare moments of real contact without that openness itself becoming a constant source of vulnerability. None of this is natural. All of it can be learned. And the learning is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming in a more deliberate, more precise, and more sustainable way who you already are. What survival actually produces, when it truly works and is not merely a performance, is a person who has stopped treating their own inner life as a problem that needs external validation to become real. The fullness of what you carry no longer depends on whether anyone around you can receive it. It exists independently of that, and this independence, quietly earned, changes the entire distribution of weight in daily life in ways that are difficult to describe, but immediately recognizable to anyone who has spent years organizing themselves around its absence. I want to say something that falls outside the structure of everything I have presented in this video. Not as an observation about the human condition in general, but as something I genuinely think, based on a life experience marked by this specific tension for as long as I can remember. I spent years interpreting the discomfort I felt in ordinary social situations as a sign that I was approaching them incorrectly, that there was a form of comfort available to me, which I kept missing due to a combination of overthinking and lack of flexibility. And I tried in various situations to find that comfort in different social environments, different ways of presenting myself, different levels of exposure and withdrawal. What I discovered consistently was that the discomfort did not respond to these adjustments in the way a problem responds to its solution. It responded the way a permanent feature of the terrain responds to someone who keeps trying to cross it by remaining exactly where it was. And the realization that it was not a problem with a solution, but a condition with a nature of its own, was not, when it finally came, a relief. It was one of the loneliest things I have ever understood. What I came to believe, not as a definitive conclusion, but as something I genuinely stand by and return to, is that the specific type of person this video is for is not a flawed version of a more comfortable type. The discomfort is not incidental to who you are. It is fundamental. Remove it, and you remove the very mechanism that makes you capable of the quality of attention, the quality of thought, the quality of presence that makes those rare moments of real contact possible. You cannot have one without the other. And I think most people who live within this tension spend an enormous amount of energy trying to preserve the capacity while eliminating the cost, which is the same as wanting to remain who you are while becoming someone the world feels more comfortable with. To be precise about what actually remains after everything this video has addressed, it is not comfort nor resolution. It is an accurate account of what you are dealing with, which is the only thing that has ever been genuinely useful for someone who thinks the way you do. The encounters you are looking for exist. This is not a motivational statement. It is a statistical and experiential reality. The people who can grasp the full essence of what you carry without requiring you to compress it into something more manageable, who ask questions that actually go somewhere, who do not retreat to safer ground the moment the conversation reaches real depth, those people exist. They are rare in a way that makes it impossible to plan their arrival. And a single encounter of that quality, a conversation that reaches the level you have been carrying alone for years, does something to a person that no accumulation of ordinary interactions can replicate or replace. What the life ahead of you actually contains are long stretches of ordinary existence, rarely interrupted, and with no set schedule for anything real. This is not a diminished life. This is the specific life available to someone built the way you are built, and fighting against that real form in favor of a form that was never available is where most of the unnecessary suffering in this particular existence comes from. The people who navigate this best are not the ones who have found a way to need less. They are the ones who have developed an honest relationship with proportion, who have stopped demanding that the ordinary be extraordinary and have stopped rejecting the extraordinary when it arrives, simply because it does not come in the expected form. Not everyone will understand you. Some of the most important relationships in your life will remain partial, without full resolution. The inner life you carry will continue to exceed what most contexts can accommodate, and that excess will continue to have a cost in the specific currency of people who process experience at this depth. None of that changes. What changes, what can actually change, is your relationship to all of it. Whether you see it as evidence that something is wrong with you, or as the simple, unglamorous and precise truth of what it means to be this kind of person in this kind of world. The weight is the same either way. The difference is whether you also carry resistance to it, on top of everything else. If this video brought you clarity in any way, subscribe. There is much more content like this waiting for you. Awareness does not isolate you. It removes the version of reality you were able to tolerate.